Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Tales from the Fandom as we get further into the month of October. This episode is with Kyle Duce of the Happy Hour with Johnny Duce Podcast. We did record this back in mid-July, so some of the things that we are talking about, such as The Defenders on Netflix and Spider-Man Homecoming, are already come and gone. However, it is a great discussion that we have about the Netflix properties and about Spider-Man as a whole, and there's some really fun stories. I hope you enjoy this episode because it was a lot of fun. As we talk about in the episode, Duce is one of the first people that I reached out to when I started Tales from the Fandom. Both he and Johnny were great helps to me in getting everything set up and just advice, and is a great time talking with him, and I hope that we get to have him back again in the future. Take a listen to a podcast promo before we dive into the episode.
Hey everybody, I'm Stephen Pappas.
And I'm Julie Ken.
And we are the host of the Meddling Kids Podcast, a review of all things Scooby-Doo.
We are going through every episode in the Scooby-Doo canon to explain all the questions you meddling kids have.
Right, exactly. Like, is Fred a serial killer? How old is Fred exactly?
Why does Daphne have such bad posture?
Where do these kids live? And is pot legal there?
Where is this place? I think it's Florida. Anyway, stick with us for the Meddling Kids Podcast, a groovy review of all things Scooby-Doo.
And welcome to another episode of Tales from the Fandom. Today I am joined by a local podcast host who I found their podcast. This is only one of the two hosts of this podcast, but I found their podcast right after I started mine, and I was thrilled to be able to reach out to them for assistance and help and advice, and it was really great to get their just general help. And if you're not listening to the Happy Hour with Johnny and Duce, you need to subscribe to that podcast because it is amazing and hilarious. And they cover a lot of wide-ranging topics, whether it's like wrestling, video games, people who cosplay, TV shows, movies, pretty much anything under the sun. And today I'm joined by Duce of the Happy Hour with Johnny and Duce. Welcome to the podcast.
What's going on, man?
Not much. I am thrilled to have you on. I'm so happy. You know, you and your co-host Johnny of obviously the Johnny and Duce Happy Hour with Johnny and Duce. You guys really helped out when I had a lot of like my early questions with my podcast. So number one, thank you, both of you, for being such a great support and help for me in my early months.
No worries, man. Like that for me is like the biggest reason we do what we do is because, you know, we're going on 3 years now. We're here in a couple weeks going to break 300 episodes. So, I mean, we've been doing this for a minute, and whenever I see new podcasters, like, I always try to reach out and help as much as I can just because, like, I feel like it's a family, and especially the local podcasting community, I just really feel like we all work together really well. I haven't had any real run-ins with anybody, and I love being able to help out other people because, trust me, I was in your boat before you got in it, and there was nobody around me on the shore to say, hey, go this way, or there's a rock over there, or, you know, there wasn't a light tower to kind of help me with that. So it's like, you know what, I'm not going to let anybody else stumble and bumble and fumble like I did. So anytime I can help, I'm always down.
That is, you're going on, or you're on 3 years now, right? Like you've passed the 3 year mark?
I believe we're on year 3. Me and Johnny need to one night, like, sit down with the calendar and actually, like, nail down when we started, because when I first started, I was on another podcast, and then he came and did an episode with me, and then me and him, because I've known Johnny since we were in high school, so we've known each other a long time, and I love the guy to death. He's my brother. So I was like, look, man, you know, we do this already, like, pretty much all the time when we're hanging out. And allegedly, as we like to say in our show for the legal department, our CPA was like, hey, if you start a podcast, you know, you can write off your beer and your video games and this and that. And I was like, dude, we need to start a podcast. Like, financially, me and you need to get down on this. So we started the ball rolling, and, you know, we started in the beginning. It wasn't so rigid as it is now. Like, we didn't have a schedule, and we were doing only once a week. And then we kind of got the schedule down and started doing twice a week. But I really need to figure out what was our, like, birthday, if you will, of, like, when was the first episode of the podcast with just me and him together, like, so we can get an exact date. But I would say we got to be probably beginning, middle, year 3, something like that.
That is awesome. And it's funny because I remember when my first year was coming up, Johnny had reached out. He's like, you know, you've done a lot better than a lot of the podcasts out there because you've actually hit that year. You're getting to that year, and you just are, you know, you're going. And, like, that's, like, the hardest thing to do is just keep up with it.
Yeah, it really is. And number one, congratulations to you, because I know you're getting close to the 100 number, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I'm at, you know, I'll go ahead and pull
like
up
80 something, I think, right?
Yeah, I'm releasing the actual episode 67 next week, but because I do all the like specials and anniversary episodes that I don't number, I don't have like an accurate number. I'm at 90 episodes have been released.
Well, see, that's a funny thing, and me and you can kind of bond over this. When we first started the show, if we had like a long interview that was 2 hours, it would be like episode 20 part 1, episode 20 part 2. And I'm like, Johnny, no, it needs to be episode 20 and episode 21 so you ring up that number count. Like, that's what you're trying for. You want the higher number count. You don't need if it's a part 1, that's fine. You can say episode 20, interview part 1, and then episode 21 is interview part 2. But don't. Because, yeah, I think we're actually way closer to our 300 goal than I think. Because we're at 287 or something.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, somewhere in that ballpark. But, yeah, no. So, trust me, I understand. That's you got to keep that number count up. And you did great, man. Because, trust me, our lucky number is 15. Because most podcasts, I'd say 90% of podcasts don't make it past the 15th episode.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's because, like, and I don't want to knock anybody who starts a podcast. I'm not trying to throw shade or anything like that. But when you start a podcast, and we did it too, you have delusions of grandeur. you think, oh my God, I'm going to be the next Chris Hardwick. I'm going to be the next Kevin Smith. Man, this thing is going to last forever. It's that chant we used to chant at the bar when we were in our 20s. We're never gonna die. We're never gonna die. You know, and it's like you think everything's gonna be great, but then, you know, somebody's kids get sick, or something comes up, or you get too busy, or work gets in the way, or there's 100 different little landmines you can step on that'll blow it up. So to get where you are, brother, is an accomplishment, and you really need to pat yourself on the back, because that's awesome.
Well, thank you so much. And one of the things that I love about your podcast is that, you know, when I started mine, I was like, I don't really know much of, like, what's out there, but it's going to be an outlet for me to, like, really just communicate with people and hang out virtually, because I don't have a lot of time personally to do that. Right. And then getting to listen to yours is like, some of the similar topics, but then you guys were talking about, like, the video games that you guys were playing and early release video games, and you get to talk to, like, pro wrestlers and all this other cool stuff. And I was like, this is a perfect fit for me to listen to and to help kind of guide where I'd like my show to eventually, as far as, like, who I talk to and recording style and everything. So I owe a lot listening to your some of your shows from probably about a year and a half ago, give or take.
Well, no, number one, thank you, man. I take that as a really big honor and a really big, that's awesome that anybody takes anything from us. I always say, you know, when it comes to that, you know, if you hear something you like and you get an idea from something, don't be ashamed to you know, borrow an idea or to kind of take an idea and make it your own, because I think in the podcasting world, we've all kind of heard something or liked something, and you're like, man, I like what that is, but I want to make my own twist on it. Because you never want to, like, wholesale steal something, because then you kind of feel silly. Or you don't want anybody coming back and saying that you stole their bit or something. But, like, if you take an idea and you use it and make it your own, I really think that that's cool. And I totally understand that. And I think that's great. And also because we kind of, listening to your show, because that was one thing I actually asked you, and this is a phrase we use on our show a lot, pull back the curtain. I asked you, I was like, have you listened to our show? And you're like, dude, I listen to your show, like, all the time. And I'm like, awesome, because that's always a big show of respect to me, and vice versa. Like, I listen to a lot of episodes of your show, because I asked you, I was like, name me, like, 3 to 5 of your episodes that you'd say it's like your highlight reel, so I can listen to them. And I definitely feel like we both kind of we're like Baskin Robbins. We have 31 flavors, but we're all selling ice cream. You know what I'm saying? Like,
exactly.
So it's like it's kind of like I can see where, you know, our shows kind of overlap a lot, which I like, because we've even overlapped on guests a bunch of times, which I think is awesome, because I love the cosplay community. I love getting cosplayers' names out there and things like that. Just really kind of, they help everybody. They help the cosplayer. They help us. So I just think that, you know, anything we can do to help them out is great, but kind of circle the wagon back around to what you were saying before. Like, I could totally see that, but I think that's why, like, number one, I don't know how much you're paying your voice intro guy, but he deserves every penny, because that intro is boss. And two, I like kind of the whole, like, when you start the show, you're like, hey, you know, welcome to the multiverse, and it's kind of got this, when I see it in my head, because I'm very theater of the mind when it comes to podcasts, I see it kind of like the Flash in the multiverse of, like, people can come out these different little wormholes, and they're like, hey, I'm a Doctor Who fan, or hey, I'm a cosplayer, or hey, you know, I like Supernatural, or whatever, you know, and they can all kind of, like, come to the same place. Like, you are the Star Labs, basically, of podcast, if you will, if you're a little... So that's kind of the way I see it, but I love it, man. Like, I love what you're doing, and I love just because that was the cool thing. Like, with the highlight reel you sent me, it was like one episode was a cosplayer, then one episode was a guy that ran, I guess, like a D&D podcast and, like, kind of had a D&D game of sorts, or a role-playing game. So it's kind of all over the spectrum, and that's, I think, why we have lasted as long as we have, because we have kind of, like, hit the whole spectrum of, you've got cosplayers. We've been very, very lucky enough to partner with a couple wrestling organizations, and they've been helping us out with interviews, and me being able to find interviews with different wrestlers and getting, you know, celebrities and, you know, doing cons and everything. You just kind of network, and you get all these different people, and I love it. And, like, I love the idea of your show, especially, like I said, the intro in the beginning, and it's like people popping out the multiverse and saying, hey, this is my fandom, this is what I get down on. Like, I love it.
For me, when I was thinking of the whole thing to begin with, I was like, we live in Orlando, where you drive down the street and you have, like, Harry Potter World and Jurassic Park and anything Universal, like Transformers and The Mummy and Disney and Star Wars, and it's, you know, we live in, like, the epicenter of fandoms for the most part.
Oh, for sure. No, I definitely think that helps, especially with what we do, because I'm never at a shortage for guests because of what we do. Like, there's always somebody I can talk to, because there are so many different fandoms that surround us here in Orlando.
Absolutely. But we are here to talk to you, because you are today's guest. So what are you into? Because I know, obviously, I've listened to your podcast, and you're into everything, like, across the board. But is there anything in particular that you want to talk to now? I mean, anything new that's come out, anything that's older that you want to, like, give some love to?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's funny, because during the summer is always kind of like my break from TV, just because of the fact that, like, all my shows go off the air. So I really get to Netflix and start, like, binge watching, and usually, like, I'll pick a show or maybe a couple shows and get through. Like, last summer was Breaking Bad. So yes. I spent the whole summer watching Breaking Bad, which was awesome. But this summer, man, Netflix has been knocking out of the park. And the first one I want to give some love to is Glow, which my first question is, did you watch Glow?
Let me tell you. Okay. I had all good intentions of starting Glow Up. The only downside is someone recommended to me Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and I probably I've watched all 4 seasons in probably like the last 3 weeks.
Well, I haven't seen Brooklyn Nine-Nine, so I can't comment, but I love Terry Crews, and I love the guy from Lonely Island that's in it, so I can't knock that. But for people out there that don't know, I'm a huge wrestling fan, so when they said they were doing a Glow show, I got really excited. And for people that go, what is Glow? I'm going to take you back to a very, very special time, and that was the 80s, my friend. There was a show called Glow, and it stood for the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. And it was an hour show every week. If I remember correctly, here, when I lived here as a kid in the Polk County area, I think we were getting it out of Tampa. And it might have been WTOG 44. I can't remember the channel. But basically, it was an hour of pro wrestling, but it was all women, which was something you never saw back in the 80s. Back in the 80s, there were very little women's wrestlers. The women you saw in wrestling back in the 80s were like Miss Elizabeth. They were more the valet role. Like, they would come out with a wrestler and be maybe a mouthpiece or arm candy. But you never really saw them wrestle.
Right.
So, like, seeing an actual hour of women wrestling was a big deal in and of itself. So when they said this show was coming on, I got really excited just because I remembered Glow. And then they said they were bringing the amazing talent, which is Allison Brie from Community and Mad Men, who I adore and love and think she is just crazy talented. So I was on board, and, man, I loved every minute of that show. That show was perfect. And also it introduced me to Mark Maron, which as a podcaster I know is a funny thing to say. And I'd heard the name Mark Maron, but I'd never listened to the WTF podcast or anything like that. So I didn't have, like, a basis for an opinion, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't have, like, a measuring stick for him. And, man, let me tell you, that guy can act his pants off. Like, there were some scenes in there where he had some heavy lifting. Because at the beginning, kind of give you the basic story. Allison Brie is an actress, and she's kind of falling on hard times, and things aren't going that great. And she sleeps with her best friend's husband. Well, then she goes and finds a show that's hiring, and they hire her, and it's Glow. And she's like, okay, great. Well, at the beginning, they don't understand that they're going to be wrestling. So then they get actual wrestlers in there to teach them. And it's an ensemble cast. There's a bunch of girls in the or women, I should say, in the show, which I like. I like big ensemble pieces where there's a lot of different characters because I'm one of those people, like, I might like 1 or 2 characters, but I usually don't like everybody. So if there's an ensemble, I've got a better chance of liking more characters than, say, if it's just 5 characters.
Right.
So, you go through the trials and tribulations of them learning how to wrestle, which is really cool. And also, if you're a wrestling fan like me, it is super cool because they got real wrestlers to come in. Like, oh, goodness, I'm going to rattle off some names that's probably only going to matter to wrestling people. But the Funkasaurus, who, goodness, and I'm going to forget what his real name is, but he plays the older brother to one of the girls because only one of the girls in the whole group actually knows how to wrestle because her dad's a wrestler and both her brothers are a wrestler, and that's a big storyline of how her family's like, no, you're not wrestling. I want you to go, like, go to college and get a degree and get a husband. I don't want you doing this. And she's like, no, this is what I want to do. And he's in it. Joey Ryan has a guest spot in it.
Okay.
Johnny Menudo, who is on Lucha Underground now.
Yeah, he used to be John Morrison over in
Correct,
WWE.
correct.
Yeah.
He's in the first episode, like the first day, like the very first episode for the first day, he's like the trainer. And then the second day, they're like, oh, where's that guy at? They're like, oh, he was too expensive and he was a dick, so we fired him. And I'm like, oh, man. I was hoping he'd be like their trainer all the way through. And I'm like, if I get 8 episodes of Johnny Menudo or a.k.a. the old John Morrison, I'm like, I'm okay with that. Like, I will watch that because he's funny, he's good looking, he can wrestle. But you see these girls, like, learn to wrestle, but also learn to do it. Like, one of the main characters, which is was Allison Brie's best friend, whose husband she slept with, is there, and she was on like a soap opera and got fired. So like she's like the centerpiece, or like we want to build this show around her, and she's not getting it. Like she just doesn't get it. Well, then she goes to an actual live wrestling match and she gets it, because literally she's sitting in the chair and she goes, "It's a soap opera. It's a soap opera," and she starts screaming, "It's a soap opera!" Because I love pro wrestling. I love it to death. But let's be real. It's a soap opera for men.
Absolutely.
Like, it's exactly what it is. So it's like once she figures out the same stories that work in soaps work in pro wrestling, she's like good to go. And watching that unfold and how they kind of do everything and how she learns. I mean, guys, I can't recommend the show enough. And here's what I love. It's bite-sized. It's only 30-minute episodes. So they're really easy to kind of like devour. And I think there's only 10. So literally you're talking about less than 5 hours to watch the whole thing. And I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, when I heard about it, because, you know, I'm 80s WWE fan from way back then.
Oh, that was back when it was the WWF, brother.
Oh, yeah. You know, I'm so conditioned to say WWE now. But, yeah, my first introduction to WWF was, like, on VHS tapes whenever I got sick. My mom went and picked them up from, like, the video store.
Video, baby.
That's right. Coliseum Video with Bobby the Brain Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse Ventura. And
there you go.
Yeah, so when I heard that Glow was, at first I thought they're actually, like, Netflix was going to do, like, its own Glow, you know, wrestling as a actual wrestling promotion. And then when I heard that it wasn't that and there's going to be more of like a actual just a TV show, I was like, okay, that'll be cool to see how close they get to it and do some stuff with, because you're absolutely right. Like back in the mid to late 80s and even up to early 90s, it was the women as valets, and those women that did used to work, like Sensational Sherry, she had just become a valet at that point. Yeah, it's a show that is on my list, and now that I've actually finished Brooklyn Nine-Nine, I now have time to go back and start up Glow.
Well, I highly recommend it. And one other thing is like a side note or a footnote I would add to that to the listeners. When you look up Glow, it'll come up on the Netflix Instant. They have a Glow documentary, which is really, really good. And it's actually about the real Glow and the real women that wrestled in Glow. And I cannot recommend that enough. And I think it's like less than 2 hours. It might be like an hour and a half, hour 45. Mm-hmm. But I'm not a huge documentary person, but I just turned it on a whim, like on a Saturday. I was like, I got nothing to do. I finished Glow. Let's watch this. And I was like, holy shnikes. Like, this was really, really good, and really kind of got, like, the behind the scenes of, like, everything that was going on and kind of how it all came about, and, like, really filled in some gaps that the show didn't fill in. So, like, I highly recommend that.
Yeah, it's definitely on my list. I'm really looking forward to it because I love Alison Brie from Community. I never saw Mad Men.
Yeah. She was on Mad Men, but she was definitely in Mad Men more of like a supporting character, like probably even a very supporting character, because I started watching Community first because I love Community, and then once I started watching Community, I fell in love with Dan Harmon. I say Dan Harmon is like my spirit animal, because I could totally see hanging out and having drinks with this guy, and me and him totally. Not in every way, because there's some things me and him don't agree on, but in a lot of ways, I think me and him would probably be really good friends, like, if we hung out, because he's a really cool dude, but he's really smart, and he's really, I mean, Rick and Morty, do I need to say more? I think you can mic drop it at that. You know, he's great, and that once I started watching that, then I started watching Mad Men, and then she popped up, and I'm like, oh my God, it's little Annie Adderall, and then I start watching it, and I'm like, whoa, Alison Brie can act her fanny off, because I just wasn't prepared for all the, because you're used to her being funny, and don't get me wrong, there's definitely some heavy lifting in Community on certain episodes, but not the heavy lifting, which was Mad Men, so I was like, wow, like, that's an awesome talent right there.
Yeah, I'm going to have to check out Glow, and then Community was amazing, such a wonderful show, and I think I stopped watching it once it went to Yahoo for the last season.
It did, and you know what? You're totally okay. You're totally okay not watching that. Because I watched like 2 or 3 episodes once it went to Yahoo, and I just was like, man, like, I love Community, so I don't want anybody that's a Community fan to like send me hate mail to hhpodcastshow@gmail.com. I was like, man, like this is where they jumped the shark. This is where everybody's in it for the paycheck, and I was like, ugh. And there were a couple episodes in there that weren't bad, but there was more, as I like to say, there was more chaff than wheat in that season. So there was like maybe 2 good episodes and maybe 8 that weren't so great, and I was like, ugh. So, but yeah, I loved Community.
Such a great show, especially early on, and I love like the paintball episodes whenever they bust those out.
Oh yeah, those were stellar. I remember a friend of mine was at my house because we used to do on Thursday nights. We used to watch TNA wrestling together, like as a group. Like we would all come over and watch it because they film it in Orlando, and we'd go to the tapings. But it was a fun night for us to get together and watch wrestling and shoot the breeze. And at that time, Hulk Hogan was actually in TNA, and Ric Flair and like some really big WWE names were over there. So that was really cool. But I remember we were watching Community before it started, and I showed a buddy of mine, actually Nate, who you can find on Twitter at the Ninja Fat Man, him and his wife, the first paintball episode, where Sawyer from Lost.
From Lost, yeah.
Yeah, he was on it, and like Nate was like, "What is this show?" And I'm like, "It's called Community." And he's like, "This is really good." And I'm like, yeah, this show's amazing. And I think I had like the first 1 or 2 seasons on DVD, like in my office. So I just gave them those. I'm like, watch these and just give them back to me when you're done. And then like they devoured them, I think, like in a weekend or like a week or something. Because it was like the next Thursday brought it back. He's like, this was awesome. And I said, I told you, man, it's just a great, great show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you finished Glow, obviously, because it's not that much. It's not like you were binging Supernatural, which is, 12 seasons long and an hour each episode.
No, if you binge a show like that, I think you deserve a medal. Like any show that's, because like I'll get ready to watch a show and I see how many seasons it is, how many episodes is in a season, and how long the episodes are. And if it's just too much, I won't even tackle it. Like there's been a couple that I've really kind of wanted to jump into, and I'm like, nope. There's like 10 seasons with 24 episodes apiece, and they're an hour long, and I'm like, nope, not doing that.
Yeah, that was me with Supernatural. I have so many friends that watch it, and I'm like, I don't know if I could do it. And then the same thing with Doctor Who is, I've been told where to start from at this point. They're like, oh, just start at point X. But it's like, now I'd have to devote hours and hours and hours and hours to watch it, and I'm not sure if I'm ready for that commitment yet.
No, that's actually like, to do that, that's a big commitment.
So what else are you binging this summer besides Glow, now that you're done with that?
Well, now that I'm done with Glow, now this is a question for you. Are you a big gamer?
I am original Nintendo owning gamer. So I've been a gamer since, I don't know, 80s, no, not 85, probably, let's see here. Nintendo system came out, and I got it in like 87, probably. Right at like Super Mario 2 had just, I think, come out at that point.
Okay, now here's a serious gamer question for you. What Nintendo did you get? What did your Nintendo come with?
Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt combined.
Nice. Now mine, golly gee, I want to say I got mine probably around when you did, 86, 87. Mine, I had those two, but it came with the power pad. And
okay.
You got it was like a track and field game that came with it.
Yep.
So that's always kind of like how I can tell how old a person is if they were a Nintendo fan. It's about like when they got their Nintendo and which system they got. Usually it's kind of a tell for me. But speaking of Nintendo and that awesomeness, they did the Castlevania series on Netflix, which I cannot recommend enough. That show was awesome.
I've heard a lot of the people that I've had on as guests have been commenting about it on like Twitter or on their Facebook pages, and they're like, well, I found my next cosplay, something from Castlevania.
Oh, yeah. Like, I've got a feeling like the next big con we go to, I'm going to see a lot of Castlevania cosplay, which is fine because I love Castlevania, so I'm not mad. The only thing that stinks about it, and this isn't a spoiler, you can figure it out when you look it up, there's only 4 episodes, and they're like 30 minutes, or I think maybe even under 30 minutes, like 24, 25 minutes apiece. So literally, I busted it out in a night because it was like less than 2 hours to get through all 4. So that was my only beef. I mean, the show was good, but there's another show I like on Netflix called The Ranch, and it's got Ashton Kutcher and Sam Elliott and the guy who played Hyde on that 70s show.
Okay.
And the format for that show is they drop 10 episodes at a time, and they call it like part 1 and part 2, and that's like one season. And the next season is part 3, which we just got like a few weeks ago, I want to say. And then part 4 is going to come later in the year. So they drop it like that, so you kind of know what's going to happen, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, okay, we got part 3, but part 4 is coming.
Right.
I feel personally, and I'm not going to drop any spoilers or anything for people because I really want people to go watch it. I feel like this was like the first part of a season, or maybe even the first quarter of a season. Like maybe the season's actually going to be 16 episodes, and this was like the first 4.
Okay.
If nothing else, worst case scenario, this was the first half, and we're going to get the second half later, just because. And like I said, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but like when you watch it, you'll understand. Like it feels like this is like the build up to something. You know what I mean? So I'm just hoping we're going to get another season. But then again, Netflix has been very, very good about not really canceling stuff. Like they like keep shows going for a long time, and
right.
They feel like they feel like the show is coming to its natural conclusion, or you know, they just feel like maybe it's not getting enough views. Because see, that's the thing with Netflix. Netflix is a weird animal. Like they don't let out the ratings like normal shows do. Like they don't let anybody know what the ratings are on a show because they don't have to. I mean, they're
right.
not ABC where they're saying, okay, I'm ABC and I'm selling, you know, advertisements to Cornflakes and Tide. Well, Cornflakes and Tide want to know how many people watch. Well, Netflix isn't doing that. You pay for the service, and that kind of pays for the show. Now, I'm sure the shows get, like, product placement and say, like, hey, you know, I'm making Glow, and I want Tide to be product placed, and then they probably make a deal with Tide that way. But, like, I don't think Netflix is going out and making those kind of things. They don't have to get the ratings, but the only 2 shows I can think of off the top of my head that have been canceled is Sense8 got canceled. But I will give Netflix this on Sense8. The backlash was so big from the fans, they said, look, we're going to do a 2-hour, like, mini-movie to wrap everything up. So it doesn't end at the end of season 2. Like, we're going to get another, like, 2-hour-long episode to kind of, like, tie everything up.
Just jumping in on that one, because I did a Sense8 episode which comes out next month.
Oh, nice.
In August. But, yeah, like, I was part of that backlash because you watched it, and they ended it on a cliffhanger, and then they, like, come around and cancel within a week or so of it being out, maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks. And it's like, I understand it's like the budget was crazy, but and spoilers for people that haven't watched it, like all the characters end up at the same place by the end of the second season. So
right.
It's not like you're having to go to Africa or Korea or India for filming all this stuff. Like
right.
You've got everybody there. Let's just get something, like anything.
Some closure, yeah.
Exactly.
And that's kind of like the other show that I know, and I wouldn't say they canceled it per se, but like, I don't know if they've dropped it yet. I think they did, and that was the last season of Bloodline, because I think they did 2 seasons, and then they said the 3rd season was going to be like the last season.
Mm-hmm.
But they had that whole season to kind of tie up all the loose ends. So you're like, okay, I'm okay with that, because me and you both know, being fans of just terrestrial TV and like normal TV shows, there's a lot of shows we have loved that have gotten canceled like on a cliffhanger, or maybe like, I'm a huge Firefly fan. It got canceled like middle of the season, so there wasn't any kind of wrap up, or,
right.
you know, like me and you are old enough and nerds enough that we've been in enough fandoms where you don't get that closure. But I feel like, at least with Sense8, that's really cool that Netflix is like, all right, here's some money, go make a finale, and like, so all the fans can get closure, which I think is cool. But man, Netflix is hitting out the park with shows, because, you know, Glow was awesome, Castlevania is awesome. Right now I'm in the middle of a rewatch of Daredevil, because I'm doing all the Marvel Netflix shows to get ready for Defenders, which comes out in August. So I actually just rewatched Jessica Jones, like, not even a month ago. So I was like, well, I'm going to skip that one, because I like literally just rewatched it, because I loved Jessica Jones. It was amazing. But I remember, at least with the first season of Daredevil, I fell asleep through a couple of them. So I was like, I'm going to rewatch it, so I'm 100% sure I'm awake. I know everything. I just started season 2 of Daredevil, and then when I get done with that, I'm going to watch Luke Cage, which so far has been my favorite of all the Marvel Netflix shows. Like, that's my hands-down favorite. So I'm saving it for dessert, and I'm not rewatching Iron Fist. Like, you can't pay me enough. So I'm going to do that as kind of like my dessert to finally get ready for the Defenders, because I am probably as excited, maybe a little bit more excited than I was for the first Avengers with the Defenders.
Really?
Yeah, because I love all those characters. Like, here's the thing people, like, don't understand when it comes to Marvel. Like, especially newer Marvel fans, they kind of got brainwashed a little bit, because Iron Man was like a C-level hero. Like, he was not like the superstar that he is now. He's a superstar because he's played by Robert Downey Jr., and that man is an acting god. Like, that man is born to play that role. It's kind of like Patrick Stewart with Professor Xavier. He was amazing as Jean-Luc Picard, but that man was born to play Professor Xavier. Like, there are certain roles, like, you were just born to play. You know, and same thing with Captain America. Now, Captain America was definitely probably in the lower A, high B category. Same thing with probably Thor, but like Black Widow was more of like a sidebar character. Same thing with Nick Fury. Like, you know, they had their own books, but they were not like when I was growing up, back when I was a kid, which was in the 80s and 90s, when you thought Marvel, you thought two things. You thought X-Men and you thought Spider-Man, and that was pretty much it. And
I'll throw in the third one, which is Fantastic Four.
Yes. Yeah. I'll give you that one. But I would say that was more like, if those were like the A squad, Fantastic Four was like high B, low A squad. Just because, I mean, they had books and they were pretty popular, but like, I remember back when I was collecting, I mean, I still collect comic books, but like hot and heavy in the 80s and 90s, it was all, you know, X-Men, Spider-Man, Punisher, like these big characters that they were known for. And like, literally the only time I ever got like an Iron Man comic book. Now, I love Captain America. I've always loved Captain America. So him, I've got to put to the side. But like, the only time I ever got a Thor or Iron Man comic book is if I bought like a lot of comic books like on eBay, or if it was like the comic book store every once in a while would have a sale. He's like, you buy this long box, this mystery box, and it was like $30 or $40, and it was filled with 100 comics, and you would get just a bunch of random stuff in there, and you might get a couple Iron Man or a couple, you know, Thors thrown in there, and it was like, oh, okay, I'll read it, because it's, you know, in the box, but it's not something I would go buy. But I would go buy Daredevil comic books, and I would go buy Luke Cage and Iron Fist, or as I knew them as Heroes for Hire.
Yes.
And then, you know, as soon as Jessica Jones came on the scene, I jumped on that because I remember when they started. Now this is really geeking out and getting a little hardcore and kind of deep cut B-side for some of you kids. Like when it was early 2000s, or it was either very late 90s or early 2000s. Marvel decided we were going to have a Max line, which is going to be these comics for adults, and they're going to have nudity, and they're going to have, like, we're not going to bleep out the curse words, and there's going to be, like, ultra violence. And the 4 titles were Nick Fury, Jessica Jones, Howard the Duck, which was really kind of weird, and War Machine, and Punisher. That was a 5th.
Yep.
So those were the 5 titles, if I remember correctly. And if I got it wrong, send your hate mail to hhpodcastshow@gmail.com. But, like, those were the 5. And I got, like, every issue of every one when they came out because I was like, I want to spend my money on this so Marvel knows this is what I want. Because at the time I was, like, just graduated high school, beginning college. You know, you're kind of in that kind of, yeah, brah, like, early 20s. Where it's like, yeah, man, there's there's boobs, and there's violence, and they're saying the F word, you know, and it's like, this is awesome. And so you're kind of like, I really dug them, and I got every one. And out of all the books, the ones I looked forward to the most was Jessica Jones, because she was such a deep character, and because she was a character that really, like, nobody knew much about. It was neat because it gave you, like, a clean slate. Like, I know Nick Fury. Like, I'm old school Nick Fury. I'm talking Howlin' Commandos old school with Nick Fury. So, like, I knew what Nick Fury was about. He was about making love to a bunch of good-looking women, smoking cigars, and just killing S. I get that. You know, same thing with Punisher. He's like, I'm going to straight up murder some mafia fools. And I'm like, I get that. And War Machine, same thing. Like, those were characters I kind of knew the beats of already, so it was nothing new to me. But Jessica Jones, I was like, this is awesome. So when Netflix said, hey, this is going to be the 4 characters that we're going to make the Defenders out of, I was like, this is awesome. And plus, with Netflix, you get something you don't get in the Marvel movies. You get character depth. Because how many Marvel movies are we at now? Like 34, 35 or something? Like, Scarlett Johansson, God bless her, amazing actress. I love Black Widow, but she's got the character depth of a puddle, man. Like, how much of her backstory do we know? How much about her character do we know? We know, like, the very, very thin layer at the top. So, for me, I'm like, I love these shows because you get really deep, rich character depth, and that's what I like. So when they said they were doing the Defenders, I was super excited. And now, allegedly, throw that out there for our legal counsel, I'm pretty sure Punisher, if he is not full on in the Defenders, he is going to be making a couple appearances during the Defenders miniseries, because as soon as Defenders gets done, the next show they're going to drop is Punisher. And
right.
I am frothing at the mouth to get Punisher, because he is one of my probably top 5 favorite all-time comic book characters. And I was like, he's getting his own show. This is awesome. And goodness gracious, Punisher is a character that is, they've tried so hard to give him some, and it's easy. Like, it's not really hard, because I was explaining to somebody this the other day, and he's like, well, haven't there already been like 4 Punisher movies? Why do we need a Punisher TV show? And I said, number 1, you need to shut your whore mouth. And number 2, like, it's a simple game plan. Like, watch Death Wish. Go watch the old Death Wish movies. That's the Punisher. He's just a guy that is out for revenge, who's out to make the city safe, who's not going to, like, arrest the bad guys. He's going to shoot bad guys in the face and be done with it. Like, there is no stopgap measures with the Punisher. It is only justice and just pure straight-up death and insanity. So I was like, once I saw him in season 2 of Daredevil, I was like, number 1, John Bernthal is just blowing it out the park. Like, that guy, which, funny little Marvel story for you, I think you might like, and your fans might like. Did you get to see the new Spider-Man movie yet?
Not yet. I'm hoping to go in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, well, number one, if you do, you need to see it in IMAX because it's awesome. And in 3D, because the 3D was amazing. But, I'm going to butcher his name, and I apologize. I believe it's Tom Holland is the new Spider-Man?
Yeah, he's the new Spider-Man.
Him and John Bernthal were both working on a movie together, allegedly, when they both got their scripts from Marvel. And guess who they ran lines with? Each other. So, Bernthal was running his Punisher lines with Holland, and Holland was running his Spider-Man lines with Bernthal. And I guess they got a really big bond because I think it was during the course of this movie is when they both got the, hey, you got the part kind of deal. So they really bonded over it, and I believe, and I got to say, super duper allegedly, take all the grains of salt, sprinkle them all over the statement, because I don't know 100% its validity, but I was told that Tom Holland said, look, I know I'm a low man on a totem pole right now. I mean, I know I'm Spider-Man, but he's like, as soon as I get any clout at Marvel to where I can make demands, my first demand is I want Punisher in one of my movies, even if it's just like a cameo, like I'm swinging by and you see him like punching somebody, you know, in an alley. He's like, I want me and John in the same movie because I want the Punisher to be in the same universe as Spider-Man. And I was like, that's the guy that gets character. Because, I mean, think about how many times the Punisher and Spider-Man and Daredevil and all those guys ran into each other in the comics. Like, all the time. So, like, I was like, as soon as he said that, I was like, all right, I like this kid. Because at first I was on the fence about him because I didn't know anything about him. I'm like, all right, yeah, he's young. Yeah, we can have him for a couple years. But I just was on the fence. But then I was watching. I was like, all right, you know what? This kid knows his stuff. This kid's smart, and he's a comic book fan. And that connection alone, I was like, that's awesome.
That is awesome. And, yeah, that's the one thing I want more of eventually. I know that with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they've not done as much as they should have done as far as, like, crossover and stuff goes. But I'd love to see some inclusion on the Netflix properties with the cinematic universe at some point. Like, besides the big green guy, or, you know, they talk about the battle in New York, and that's pretty much about it.
Well, and see, that's the thing, is like, and it's on both sides of the coin, like, why we haven't had Agent May and Agent Coulson in a Marvel movie yet is, in my opinion, borderline a mortal sin. Because think about how many times they've shown, like, a S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier, or they've had a bunch of S.H.I.E.L.D. guys together. Just have them standing in the background. Like, they don't have to have, like, a monologue. Just have them, like, say something. You know what I mean? Or, like, say, hey, Mr. Fury, here's that intel you wanted us to get. And have, like, him and Agent May give him an iPad with some information he needs on it. Like, there's so many little things you could do to make them in the universe that, think about it. You get the guy who plays Agent Coulson and the lady who plays Agent May to come on set one day to hand Samuel L. Jackson an iPod with information of it. Bam, now they're connected. You know, that wasn't that hard. Our same thing with you know, now that we've got Daredevil and Luke Cage and stuff, you could literally have Spider-Man swinging by a building and have Daredevil, like, beating somebody up on the top of it or in the middle of a fight, or have, like, you know, Luke Cage is at the barbershop and he's, you know, sweeping out in front of the barbershop, you know, and then Spider-Man swings by. Like, it's so simple to, I mean, you don't have to make these long, drawn-out parts for him. Like, you could just have, like a split second, like a 30-second shot of Spider-Man going by the barbershop, Luke Cage is out in front, and he's like, my man Spidey, or something. I don't know. Say something to Spider-Man while he swings by. It's like, I like what you're doing, kid, or something like that. You know,
exactly.
That would take 30 seconds. It would cost you one day of work to get that guy out there. And plus, you know, they're filming out in New York already for those scenes. You know, just have it overlap. I mean, why Marvel hasn't done this is stupid, because here's the thing. If that happens, the nerd world explodes, and because the nerd world has gotten so big, everybody kind of wants in on it. And they're going to be like, well, who was that guy sweeping out in front of the barbershop? And they're like, oh, he's Luke Cage. Well, who's Luke Cage? Oh, he's got a show on Netflix. Oh, Netflix? I've got Netflix. And then they go and they watch the show. And, I mean, now you've got a new viewer that you never would have had before. And it's that simple.
One of the things I like to ask whenever I bring up like Marvel movies or DC movies or the shows is, if Netflix came to you and they said, okay, you know what, we've got our Defenders and we've got like the Punisher show, but we're looking to add maybe one or two new shows into the rotation, which characters would you choose to throw into a Netflix series?
Man, I think I'm going to give you a couple. One is Moon Knight.
Yep, that's the one that I've always heard. Everyone says Moon Knight.
Well, Moon Knight was kind of, if you're a Moon Knight fan, was kind of a Batman almost. Like, almost a Batman ripoff in a lot of ways. But, like,
oh, yeah.
He's a really intense character, and there's a lot of layers to it. Like, the fact that Netflix hasn't jumped on that character or said, hey, can we get the rights to that character, in my mind, blows my mind. And plus, the reason why it worked so good is Moon Knight worked a lot with Daredevil. Like, because they all kind of worked in New York together. So it's like, well, you've got an easy connection there to add him to that kind of, because, like, I see what they're doing with the Netflix shows, and I actually kind of think it's a brilliant idea. They're trying to do, I actually used to, I'm a role player, and I play role-playing, like tabletop role-playing games. And one of the games we played almost exclusively was the old TSR Marvel Superheroes game. And, like, when we played that game, like, you would always start, like, think of it like a level 1 D&D character. You would start as a boots-on-the-ground superhero. Like, I'm the guy that's just trying to protect my neighborhood and protect my block in New York and just make sure, you know, old Mrs. Smithers gets across the street okay and nobody steals her purse. Or I want to make sure that, you know, old Ralphie the drunk doesn't beat up on his wife this week. Or, you know what I mean? Like, you're trying to do, like, the little things, not the big, oh, my God, aliens are coming from the sky and I've got to defend New York. You're doing, like, the boots-on-the-ground stuff. And what Netflix has been so smart, when they started their shows, that's what they did. They said, look, let's get characters that are super easy to film, because think about it. Daredevil, I mean, he's got superpowers, but he doesn't have real superpowers. It's not like they got a CGI laser beams coming out his eyes or something.
Right.
Like, it's all basically kung fu and, you know, easy stunt work to film that doesn't cost a lot. Same thing with Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, and Iron Fist. That's all very limited CG. It's mostly martial arty kind of stuff, and it's very boots on the ground, you know. And with all that being said, Moon Knight to me is like that as well, to where almost like the Punisher. He's very boots on the ground, very, you know, I'm just trying to protect the neighborhood, you know. You don't need them to fight some big giant, like, aliens are coming out of the sky, big bad. You can throw, because God knows Netflix doesn't know of any other villains, throw ninjas at them. Because every time I watch these Netflix shows, I'm like, come on, man. Like, do you got anybody besides ninjas that you can throw at this guy? Like, anything. You know, but I understand that doing that means they don't have to use superpowers and stuff, and it doesn't cost as much budget-wise, you know, because I understand when you're doing, like, say, like a Cyclops or something where they're shooting laser beams at their eyes, or, you know, anything that's not your basic martial arts, that's going to cost a lot of money in a CGI budget. Like, goodness knows how much the Flash spends every week on their budget. You know, so I get that, but I've always said that would be a good one. Now, this is completely left field. Probably wouldn't even be attached to the other Netflix shows, or if it was, it'd be just very little. I'd love to see Howard the Duck. I love Howard the Duck, and I think that is a great character. The problem is that's a lot of CG, unless you want to, like, make an actual suit, even though we've seen that before and it didn't work so well. But it's not the 80s anymore. Maybe they've come up a lot further with duck suit technology. I don't know, but I would love to see the other one probably be a Howard the Duck show, because I think that'd be really good. But I'd love to give you more. The problem is other networks have already stolen, because Freeform has stole Cloak and Dagger, which is going to be awesome. They've also stole Squirrel Girl, which are doing a Squirrel Girl show, and it's like her and like 4 or 5 other heroes.
Her and the New Warriors.
Her and the New Warriors, which is going to be awesome. And then Hulu stole the one that I really wanted, which was Runaways.
I am excited for that.
And I'm really excited because, like, I'm not going to lie, like, I wasn't really on the Hulu bandwagon, but I was able to watch Handmaid's Tale.
Yes.
And then once I watched that, I was like, all right, okay, I'm down with Hulu now. Like, Hulu put money on that show. Like, the budget was good. They had great actors and actresses. Like, the story was good. And I was like, okay, if you keep this level of production and this level and caliber of actors, which, have you seen the actors that are in Runaways?
Yes.
I mean, that is like a who's who of genre actors when you look at it. Like, I mean, you got Spike from Buffy. At that point in my book, you can mic drop it. It's like, we got Masters, boom, mic drop. Okay, I'm in. Like, I don't need anybody else besides him. But then you have a bunch of other people that have done other really good projects, and I'm like, okay, like, the cast is pretty solid. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I'm like I said, I'm really looking forward to, even though I don't watch Freeform, I'm going to watch it for Squirrel Girl and for Cloak and Dagger, because, I mean, I just think both of those shows have a lot of stories to tell, and they have a lot of longevity if they do it right.
Exactly, and that's the key thing, is that there's just so much, and I hope that they can really just not just get like the big pieces and the characters, but get that really the background stories for them.
Well, I think that's why I've liked the Netflix shows so much, because I call them set pieces. Like, there will be these big action set pieces. Like, prime example, Daredevil, we use a hallway scene. Like, that hallway scene, you watch that and you're like, oh my God, this is some of the best action I've ever seen on TV. And they did that really, really well. But what they also did really well is all the little scenes, like with Foggy and with the secretary and with Matt and with, I believe her name's Claire, the one that's played by Rosario Dawson. Like, these little intricate character moments they did really, really well, too. And that's the thing, like, excuse me, I think Marvel gets really lucky with the movies because they have so much money, they can make these big action sequences that you remember when you leave the theater. But I'm one of those people that those are great, but I need the little character moments too. Like, I need the story. I need to know, like, what's the motivation? Like, why is this character doing this? Why is that character doing that? Like, those are the things I want to see, and that's why I think I like the Netflix shows almost better than the movies, because of the fact that you get all those little movements. That, I understand, you can't do that in a 2-hour movie. Like, you can't, you know, everybody doesn't get their time to shine if you've only got 2 hours, especially when it's a big cast movie. But, you know, Netflix does them really well, and I'm really, really excited for the Defenders.
As am I. Now, before we wrap things up, I've mentioned it at the beginning, and we talked about it a little bit. You are a part of the Happy Hour with Johnny and Duce Podcast, and just for people that might not have heard about it, what is your podcast about, so to speak? Basically,
what we try to do with our show is we tell people it's basically two guys and sometimes a gal, because we've got a third member, Brandy, Johnny's wife, who comes on some episodes with us too, who's our third member. And it's just two guys and a gal on a couch drinking beer and talking. And I think we've had longevity with our show because we really stick true to that mantra, that it's just a couple guys on the couch drinking beer. I actually remember we had an interview a couple weeks ago with a star of Ring of Honor, the Beer City Brawler, Beer City Bruiser. And he came on the show, and I think he was a little scared to begin with, because I don't think he'd done a lot of podcasts before. But we start the show with what we call the Duce Salute, which is we both open a beer up right next to the microphone, so you can hear that shh of the beer opening. And as soon as we did that, like, his wall came down. He was like, you know what? As soon as you guys opened a couple beers, I knew we were going to be okay. And I was like, awesome, man. Because he knew that we were going to be laid back, because, like, we do a lot of interviews with cosplayers, with, wrestlers, with celebrities. And number one, we're thankful that we get those interviews. But two, I've yet to get done with any interview where a guest has not said, number one, that's the most fun I've ever had on an interview. And two, they're like, you guys are just so cool and relaxed and relatable. You made me feel comfortable. You know, you made me open up. And that's what we really, we try and do. Like, with the ROH guys, we've been lucky enough that we've been able to interview a lot of the guys that are like on the – in wrestling, you've got the main card, which is your big guys, like your Hulk Hogan, your Rocks, your, you know – then you've got your mid-card, which is like your Intercontinental title guys, like, say, a Miz, or throw it old school, the Honky Tonk Man. And then you've got the lower card guys, the guys that usually maybe open a show, or the guys you see at the beginning that you don't know much about. And I really enjoy interviewing those lower card guys because, like, a lot of people don't know much about them. Like, they don't get the publicity that the big guys get. And, like, it kind of is a way that they can express themselves and they can kind of get out there. And get their name out there. And that's the same thing we do with cosplayers, because we've had this conversation with cosplayers a lot. They do our show, and they're like, we really appreciate it. Because this was like, I want to say our third or fourth cosplayer we had on, who's a big name. And she said, look, I really want to thank you guys for this. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm like, we thank you for doing this. Like, because she was a big, big name. I'm like, are you serious? Like, you've got all these, like, Instagram followers and Twitter followers and, like, Facebook followers. Like, I'm really surprised you just even replied to our email, much less that you did the show. And she's like, no, I really appreciate it. Because she's like, you guys got to understand, people know what I look like, and they've seen me, but 95% of my fans don't even know what my voice sounds like. Or know who I am as a person, and they were like, you didn't come in here and ask me a bunch of silly questions or questions about costumes. You were like, hey, what video games you're playing, or, like, what's your favorite kind of beer, or, like, what TV and movies are you into? Like, it was all about them, and she was like, I really appreciate that, because she's like, I've never really done anything like this, and I was scared, but she was like, you made me so comfortable and so relaxed that, like, I really had a good time. And now we have a really long-standing relationship with this young lady, and we've done a lot of interviews with her. And, like, anytime she does a big convention, like, she comes on our show and talks to us, which it's still, to this day, I appreciate. I can't believe she even returns our phone calls. But, but you know, and it's cool, and it's what I've kind of said with our podcast at the beginning, because, you know, the problem with podcasting is, and I'm going to step on a couple toes here, sometimes podcasters, once they get past a certain number of episodes or a certain number of listens, they kind of get too big for their britches, or they kind of get, you know, like a big head. But I've always been like, I can't believe we've gotten this far. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah. I can't believe we got this far. So, like, I just kind of take everything as a blessing, and I thank God every day that we get the opportunities that we get, and I just feel like everything we get is just a blessing, and it's good karma, and it's just, you know, and we treat all of our guests amazing, and we've had so many amazing guests. I mean, I can't even list them all. You know, I think it's really been through just the power of positivity and just being really cool with our guests and just having such great interviews and having fun. It's like, hey, you know, come on the show. Let's have a couple beers together. Let's, you know, have a good time. And that's been great. And also just the great love from our sponsors like Grove Roots Brewing and Retro Game Treasure, which has been an amazing sponsor. Both those guys have. They've been with us for a long time now. They're really the backbone that kind of keep the gas in the tank of the Happy Hour with Johnny and Duce engine, so we can't thank them enough. But it's just really it's been a lot of fun. It's been a wild ride, and I've loved every minute of it. And we have so much fun. And I think, and I can actually, I'm going to ask you a question about our podcast since you're a fan and a listener. I think you can tell when you listen to the episodes how much fun we're having, how much fun the guests are having.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I jumped in probably May or June of last year, and it's been on or off because I think I told you, with the summer there's no commuting, so I can't listen to certain podcasts out loud. But I did listen to, like, you had Bailey Vay, who was one of my first 5 guests that I had on the podcast. And I got to, I listened to her episodes, and I try to, catch whenever you have people that are, either people I've seen on Instagram or Facebook, and, just to really enjoy the shows that you guys do. Or even when you, there's one thing where you guys were just talking about video games for the entire show. I was like, okay, let me take a listen about like what their opinions are on the video games that are out.
Yeah, and I think those have been really good, and we've only done a handful of them, but just this is actually kind of a sneak peek behind the scenes for your listeners. We have got more of our retro game episodes coming out, because what we would do is we'd take like 1980 and we printed out a list of like all the games that came out, like in the arcade for like the Nintendo, like for the Super Nintendo, like all the games that came out that year. We talk about them, and we went in order, and those have been really, really good. And like we've gotten a lot of listens to those episodes. So we got more of those coming. But it's, like you said, with Bailey Bay, it's been so great to meet these cosplayers, and now they're our friends. Like, Bailey's my girl. Like, Bailey comes to the house, like, all the time, like, her and her boyfriend, and, like, they hang out and they watch, like, wrestling with us at the house, and, like, we have parties at the house, and she comes over. So I think that's one of those things that's been really cool, like, making friends, like, with Amy Nicole Cosplay and Maria Saber, and just, you know, not to name drop and, you know, be that guy. But, like, these are people that I call friends, that, like, numbers in my phone book that, like, I call, and I'm like, hey, you know, I saw your boyfriend got a new job, great, or, hey, you know, oh, Bailey, I just saw that you're going to be at Sci-Fi Bartow this year coming up. You definitely want to check it out, because Happy Hour Johnny Duce, the official podcast, Sci-Fi Bartow, will be there. But, like, it's one of those things, like, where we can kind of, like, lift each other up, because that's my big thing with, and it's not even just a podcast. That's just me as a person in life in general. I'm really big on positivity. I'm really big on being nice to people, and I'm really big on lifting other people up. And the podcast just gives me a bigger platform to do that. So being able to have these people as friends, like Bailey and Maria Saber and Amy Nicole and all these other, Danica Rockwood, all these other amazing cosplayers that I can call my friend. You know, it's really, really cool, and it's great. Carrie Marie, I mean, God, I need to stop name dropping. I'm becoming a you-know-what hole. You know, it's great to have these people that are your friends, that you know, and that you see at conventions, because, like, that's kind of where the whole cosplay thing for us started, really, was we would go to these different conventions and meet these cosplayers and interview them. And I was like, you know, we interview wrestlers, we interview celebrities. Cosplayers are celebrities. Why don't we start interviewing these guys? So, and then we kind of started getting that ball rolling, and once that ball started rolling, it just didn't stop, because it was one of those things where one cosplayer was like, man, I had such a great time on this show, and then they tell their friend, and then they get a hold of us. They're like, hey, I heard you had so-and-so on the show. I'm her friend. She told me at the last con how much fun she had, and I'm like, oh, yeah, awesome. Do you want to do the show? And she's like, yeah, I'd love to do the show. And now we're lucky enough that, like, we're booked, like, 3 to 4 months in advance, guest-wise. Like, so, like, when people are like, hey, I want to do the show, and I'm like, great, that's awesome. What are you doing in November? Because, you know, we're booked that far in advance because of just the outcry of people that kind of want to be on the show and kind of want to get that Happy Hour with Johnny Duce love, because that's another thing a lot of the cosplayers have said to us, and other celebrities too, wrestlers, everybody. They're like, I've never felt so good than when I got off the phone with you. It's like, you basically were my cheerleader for an hour, and it's like, that was better than going to therapy. That was better than going and drinking with my buddies. You basically just stroked my ego for an hour and made me feel great. And I was like, well, that's what we do, you know?
Absolutely. And that's the same thing here. Like, but I pre-record a lot of my stuff. So it's to the point now where a lot of the episodes that I'm recording, they're like, okay, October and November is when they're coming out, and then I get to take a break from just doing all the recording stuff and just do editing and promoting and getting the stuff out there.
And trust me, we're on the same boat with you, because we literally tape every single week. So every week we have to do 2 episodes, and then we got to turn them around pretty quick so they're out the next week. But
right.
We were very, very lucky, and I don't think we could have done this if we hadn't hit that 3-year mark, but I did a lot of cons in a row. I'm talking, like, in the span of 2 months, I probably did, like, 3 or 4 cons, and we had all this audio sitting there, and I was like, Johnny, me and you both need a vacation. Let's take the month of July off. Let's just air all these episodes that I've already taped You can edit them. You can kind of push them out, at your leisure, so we're still getting our episodes out on Tuesday and Friday, and then we can take a little vacation. And I'm not going to lie, this vacation has been super nice because once you've been doing it every single week for 3 years, it's a grind, man. Like, it is a grind. So, number one, I salute you for being smart enough to be able to tape a bunch at one time so then you can just take a couple months off and drop them. Because that is brilliant, and I wish we had done that sooner. But also, it's tough. It's got to be tough for you because our biggest problem with, like, this month is we haven't been able to be relevant. Like, if some new news dropped, like, we're kind of behind the 8 ball because it's like, that's great. It's trending right now, but we can't talk about it for, like, 3 weeks. So, like, Spider-Man, like, I love Spider-Man, and we were probably going to get into Spider-Man on this episode. I don't know if we're going to do that, but, like, I was super pumped about that, and I'm like, oh, it's trending, we need to talk about it, but it's like, crap, we're not taping for a month, and in a month it's not going to be near as poignant as it is right then. So you don't get to strike the iron while it's hot, which is why I'm glad we tape every week, because we can be real topical and really hit issues like as they're coming out. But, man, my hat is off to you, sir, for being brilliant enough to be like, no, I need to spread this out.
Well, I learned from my first month of recording when we were talking about the end of Game of Thrones, and it came out like 3 months later.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's the issue right there.
Yeah, and that'll happen, man, because the problem is like, they want to know about the end of Game of Thrones the week it ended. They don't want to know about it 3 months later. Like, we were trying to do that with Westworld because we all fell in love with me, Brandy, and Johnny fell in love with Westworld. So we were like trying to do it as quick as we could, but we just weren't quick enough. And we found out that, like, that's when we really learned, like, if you're going to be topical, you need to be topical. You need to be on the ball and, like, know what's going on and do it as quick as possible. And so that's definitely when we come back from our break. We're going to do that really hard, is try and be more topical about things. But there's a lot of big things in the works for Happy Hour Johnny and Duce that the fans don't know about yet. But it's going to be an exciting year for us. The road to 300 is almost done. We're about to get on the road to 400. And, put on a helmet and strap your seatbelts on, folks, because it's going to be a fun ride.
For those who need to follow you or need to subscribe or need to find you on social media, where are the best places to do that?
The best places to do that is our Facebook page, facebook.com/Happy Hour Podcast Show. Also, you can hit us up on Twitter @HH Podcast Show. If you want to hit up me personally, Duce, you can hit me up on Twitter @AllThingsDuce. You can find our episodes, all of our episodes, the entire backlog is on SoundCloud.com/Happy Hour Podcast. Also, you can send us your emails to hhpodcastshow@gmail.com. If anybody, because I know you've got a lot of cosplayers that listen to your show. If any of you guys are cosplayers that are listening and you're like, you know what, this Duce guy sounds pretty funny, I think I might want to hang out on the Happy Hour sometime. Seriously, hit us up on Twitter, hit us up on Facebook, hit us up at the Gmail, hhpodcastshow@gmail.com. I literally can say I don't think we've turned down one guest so far that's asked to be on the show. So especially if you're like a new cosplayer and up and coming and you kind of want to get that rub and that push, and I don't want to sound like a condescending you-know-what hole, but coming on the Happy Hour with Johnny and Duce is going to get you some love. So I would highly recommend it. New school or old school cosplayer, like if you're like, hey, man, I want to get to that next level, it's not a bad place to go to find it. I also would recommend coming on Tales from the Fandom, man. Like if you want to get some love, Tales from the Fandom is the place to do it.
Well, thank you for those kind words. And, of course, all the links and information will be in the show notes and on our Facebook page as well. And, Duce, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and being a guest and being the great supportive person in the podcast community from the beginning and up until now and into the future.
Oh, no worries, man. If anybody out there happens to be starting a podcast, want to start a podcast, has got podcasting questions, feel free to send them to us, man. Like, I will sit down with you and talk with you for hours about podcasting and answer any kind of questions you guys have. Because trust me, like I said at the beginning of the episode, like, when I started this journey, I was in a boat by myself trying to figure out the rapids as they came, and it was tough. And I made myself a promise when I was going down those rapids. I said, I'm never going to let somebody else do this by themselves that doesn't have to. So if you got, I mean, I don't care if it's a huge question or if it's a little itty-bitty, teeny-weeny question. You feel free to ask, man, because, you know, I'm a big fan of sitting under the learning tree. And I think when you ask people that have been doing it maybe longer than you have, or maybe have, you know, been doing it a while or been gone further down the road than you, I always want to learn from those people. Like, you know, there's podcasters that I look up to that I send emails to and then I ask questions of. I'm like, hey, man, you know, we hit this wall. What's the next step? Or, hey, I'm trying to do this. What do you think's the best move? Like, now that we have gotten far enough along, you know, I can get some of those emails returned, and, you know, it's a great thing. So I always try to, you know, pay it forward and pass the love on. So if any of you guys out there need any, I'm serious, man, any help at all, just send it to us at a happy hour. Just ask for Duce, ask for Johnny, because Johnny, even though he's not on the show with me, he's here in spirit. I love that guy. He's my brother. He'll answer your questions too, because he feels the exact same way I do. And we just love to help, man. That's what we're here for. Any way we can help, we're down to do it.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much, and everyone just go take a listen, scroll through, find some good episodes, because they're out there for happy hour, and you'll really enjoy the show.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.